We begin this news hour in Ukraine, where the head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group has vowed to transfer control of the eastern city of Bakhmut to the Russian army by the 1st of June. Wagner founder Yevgeny Prigozhin claimed to have captured Bakhmut on Saturday, but Kyiv says it still controls parts of the city, which has seen some of the most intense fighting of the war so far. Ukraine says its troops are still advancing on the outskirts of Bakhmut, but Mr. Prigozhin said his troops will start handing over the city to the Russian army on Thursday and would be gone by the start of June. Earlier this month, the US said it believed more than 20,000 Russian soldiers had been killed in the battle for Bakhmut and another 80,000 wounded after more than 9 months of attritional fighting. Arise News is unable to independently verify the figures. Well, Russia says it's hunting for a group of saboteurs who crossed the border from Ukraine into Belgorod region. The region's governor said that a Ukrainian sabotage group had entered Russian territory in the Graivoron district bordering Ukraine and was being repelled by Russian forces. Unverified videos on social media showed black smoke rising in the distance with the sound of explosions. Ukraine has denied any involvement. The Kremlin said the incursion aimed to distract attention from Bakhmut, which Russian forces claim to have captured in its entirety after months of intense fighting. Meanwhile, electricity has been restored at the Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant in Ukraine. Ukraine's state-owned power generating company accused Russia of carrying out missile strikes early this morning that cut off power at Europe's biggest power plant. But Russia's defense ministry said Ukrainian shelling damaged the high-voltage line and caused the blackout. The outage is reported to be the 7th time the plant has entered what it described as blackout mode since Russia took control of the facility soon after launching its full-scale invasion more than a year ago. For more on the war in Ukraine, let's speak to the U.S. military analyst Doug Brooks, who joins me now from Washington. Good to see you, Doug. And as we've been hearing, the decision to send American F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine was one of the big announcements in the run-up to the G7 summit. How significant is that decision?
It's a pretty significant decision, but it's not entirely unexpected. We know that the Americans and others have actually been training Ukrainians to fly F-16s, perhaps not in an F-16, but in other aircraft. So it's something that's been coming, and there are lots of surplus F-16s within the NATO forces. So this is something that could happen fairly quickly.
But just to be clear, our understanding is that sending F-16s from the US is not on the cards, and that it's the European countries that will be supplying them, though the US has agreed to train Ukrainian pilots.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with the audio. Hearing you?
Right. Okay, let me just repeat that question. I said, just to be clear, our understanding is that sending F-16s from the US is not on the cards, and that it's the European countries that will be supplying them, though the US has agreed to train Ukrainian pilots.
Yes, that's correct. So it looks like the F-16s would be coming from Europe, not from the United States. They need to be upgraded, and I guess they've been in storage, so they need to be revamped, as it were, to get them ready. There are rumors that some of them are already prepared and could actually make it to Ukraine in a matter of days, weeks, if not days. So the potential there is pretty astonishing.
And of course, Doug, it was only, I believe, in February that the Biden administration was ruling out these F-16 fighter jets being allowed to go to Ukraine. What do you think changed?
That's a really good question. So in general, the United States has been very careful to make sure that the weapons they give to Ukraine are not used to escalate the war, to bring the United States into the war. Um, Obviously, they've been looking at the whole F-16 issue for quite a while, and certainly there's been a lot of pressure from other NATO countries to allow F-16s into Ukraine. So it's not quite clear entirely what has gone all come together on this one. I think most analysts are not particularly surprised by it. An F-16 is not, a strategic bomber, but it could have a significant impact on what's going on in Ukraine. And it's definitely a very strong sign that the United States is fully behind Ukraine and Zelensky in this war.
Well, let me sort of press you a bit on that point, because you're the military experts. I mean, once the F-16s have arrived, which may take some time, and they're up and running, I mean, what will they enable Ukraine to do that they may not be able to do at the moment?
I'm sorry, the sound coming here is very garbled from.
Okay, I'll try that again. I said once the F-16s have arrived, which may take some time, and they are sort of up and running, what will they enable Ukraine to do that they may not be able to do at the moment?
In terms of the capabilities of the F-16s, they're significantly more improved than the current aircraft that Ukraine has, which are mostly these old Soviet aircraft, which are slightly upgraded. But the F-16, which was actually made about the same time, is a much more capable aircraft. It can use all the NATO weapons very easily. It's designed for that. The avionics, everything. It's a much better aircraft. Personally, it looks like a very dangerous environment for aircraft in this particular war. But from what I've been hearing from the real analysts, it's something that could actually be very useful. And they say it could change everything. But I think there's enough other equipment that's going into Ukraine that this particular combat, this particular battle is really going one direction. And I think the writing is on the wall for Russia at this point.
Well, let's look at what's happening on the ground in Ukraine. We're also hearing about stuff happening at the border there. What a group that Moscow calls saboteurs, who crossed over from Ukraine to attack Russia's Belgorod region. Soldiers that have been described by Ukraine as Russian citizens. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is a really interesting incident, and this has happened before, but it was a small raid that just attacked or basically occupied a small village on along the border. This one's a lot more significant. Apparently, there's armored vehicles. The Russians have been apparently quite panicked about this. They've been flying helicopters in, possibly a quick reaction force to kind of address this. Allegedly, and we don't know all the details at this point, this is just Russians, free Russians as they call themselves, that are doing this incursion, possibly with some Ukrainians, but certainly with Ukrainian knowledge that this is happening. And it does look like it's causing quite a kerfuffle in Russia at this point. So we'll have to see where this goes. But at the same time as this incursion happened, it's quite interesting that the head of Ukrainian intelligence came out with a video. And the video basically says to the Russian soldiers, this is a good time to save yourself. If you surrender, you will be treated as a legitimate POW. You'll get 3 square meals a day. You'll be safe. And really interesting, you'll have the option of staying in Ukraine or possibly immigrating to Europe rather than go back to Russia after the conflict. So this all combined is putting a lot of pressure, a lot of political pressure on Russia at this point.
Doug, thanks very much indeed. Doug Brooks is a U.S. military analyst, and he was talking to me there from Washington.